We got a couple daffodils, votes for daffodils. Welcome, Lauren. Welcome, Lance. Kindergarten. All right. I know you're tired, Brittany. Boise, California, Illinois. We've got Rhode Island, Michigan. We are all over. I'd love to see that and want to welcome everybody once again for being here today. We have a great session in store for you. We do want to take a second to introduce ourselves and let you know who's here with us today. I think Brendan's running a little bit late, but we have our executive director, Dr. Liana Alvarado, is here with us today. And of course, David DenHartog, our manager of academics, partnership and strategy, and myself, Sarah Chattel, one of your strategy coaches. Happy to be here with you all today. Happy to introduce what we've got going on and what the session's going to look like. And I am looking here. Do we have Brendan? We do not have Brendan. So Brendan will be joining us shortly. That's Brendan Haggerty, also a strategy coach. And taking a look at our topic, I do want to remind everybody, you've probably seen that this is part one of a two-part series. So we are going to have a great introduction and foundation to our Leading with Nature Biomimicry for System Change COP today. And we also have the part two that'll be up on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. So you'll end out of part two session with some great content that you can share at the table when you're having margaritas Cinco de Mayo evening. But today, our focus for today, exploring the connections between biomimicry, leadership, problem solving, and whole school transformation, really diving into that leadership piece and looking at leadership traits and personal application. So you'll be able to do some reflecting today on your own leadership styles. And we're really excited about that. So we want to, again, remind you, part two is May 5th. In addition, up next, in terms of our programming, really excited, our inaugural first ever Green Spark. It's a student-focused showcase. We have students coming from all over the United States that are coming in to present their work and share some amazing sustainability projects that they've been working on. And you can sign up still, and that'll be at the end of the session. You can see it on our website, greenschoolsnationalnetwork.org. But you can register to pop in. We would love your support. We want the students to feel like they have an audience there and honored, and we really want to highlight them and showcase their work. And if you are able to pop in on any session, please go on our website, register for any session. The sessions are about 40 minutes long, so throughout the day. So even if you can only come to one, we'd love to have you there. All right, without further ado, we do want to welcome our leads for today, our special guest, but also our very own. So today, leading our session, we have David DenHartog, which again, he's our manager of academics, partnerships, and strategy here at Green Schools National Network. And our special guest, Megan Schuknecht. She is a biomimicry expert. She's going to share some awesome things today, and I am going to hand it right on over to Dave to get today's session started.
Thanks, Sarah. Hey, it's a real welcome. It's really a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. Thanks for making some time for this experience. And both Megan and I are excited to share a little bit with you all and have you engage in some conversation. Just as a brief background.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dave.
Yeah.
Great to see everyone. I would love, since this is two parts, if we could record our session. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, it's being recorded, Ileana.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. So just as a background for you all, a year ago, I was involved in a really amazing class through Harvard that was focused on sustainability and leadership. And then in the spring of last year, I did this 3-part series that highlighted some of the concepts and elements that were part of that. One part of that was this focus on leadership and the connection to the natural world, and specifically through biomimicry. And so it was a really amazing course. Last year, when I did this 3-part series, we went through a lot of elements of it, and I think people found it interesting. That course was led by Leith Sharp, who is this really amazing person who has done a lot of work around sustainability. You for sure need to learn more from her at some point, can check out some of that. These are some of the significant takeaways from that course. We're not going to go through the whole course today. We're going to go forward actually from what we did last spring and go a little bit deeper. And that's partly why I invited Megan to join us today, and so privileged and honored that she's here and going to be part of our conversation. But these are some of the things that were a core elements of that course. And one aspect of it was just thinking about these different hierarchies that are in our world. There's these adaptive hierarchies and adaptive ways of looking at things and more hierarchical ways of looking at systems. And these different types of systems are certainly what encapsulates what's happening in education. It's typically more hierarchical in our K-12 system. And sometimes we need more adaptive elements to be a part of that. But ultimately, like was part of that course and is part of all of our work and probably every single person that's on this call together, like how can we accelerate, deepen, and quicken this work so that we can do this to scale? Because like Lead Sharp talked about, it's not just about improvement, and it's not simply about changing some things. It's about really being in this focus on continuous innovation. And so it takes all of us and be really thoughtful and mindful about that. And it's not easy. There's ups and downs. There's a lot of squiggles. There's all kinds of friction and flow that are part of that. And these were all elements that got brought up the last time that we talked about this, and were part of that course as well. These slides, I'm going through them quickly, but we'll come back to them and we'll send you copies of them so that you can check them out and go a bit further with them later as well. One part of that course was to dive deep into biomimicry, and we did some really interesting things thinking about what is biomimicry. And many of you might know of Janine Banyas and the work that she's done and helped to lead, and Megan has been a part and connected with her for a long time. And essentially what we're thinking about in the context of biomimicry is this learning from nature and then emulating what we find. But I'm going to turn it over to Megan now for a few minutes just to ground us a little bit deeper into these elements of biomimicry. She's going to share. We're going to go through that, and I'm going to come back to some aspects of leadership, and then we're going to ask for you to engage in some conversations with a partner as well, and all connected and around this work. If there are questions or things you think of or want to ask about as we go through, for sure, just pop them in the chat. And once again, we'll make sure that you get all of these slides when we're done as well. All right, take it away, Megan.
Okay, thank you, David, and thank you, Sarah. I know there's a different level of experience among you and your knowledge of biomimicry. So just quickly, I want to reiterate that we're going to talk about biomimicry in practice, but biomimicry is also a practice. It's something that you can get better with time. And so just having it in your mind as you're outside, as you're going about your day, it's kind of like a muscle you need to work. And the more you do it, the more you'll see lessons from nature all around you. I also just want to make a small distinction that biomimicry is slightly different than bio-inspired design, at least in the way I think about it, because it's starting from a place of sustainability. And it really is about learning how to fit in better on the planet with all of the other species we share it with. Whereas bio-inspired design, you can emulate nature to do damage as well. So bio-inspired design is all over defense applications, for example, right? But here with biomimicry, we're definitely more interested in sustainability. There are 3 ways you can think about practicing biomimicry. And again, this isn't like a hard and fast thing, but just to help you think about it. So you can practice from biology to design. And when you're doing that, you're looking for an inspiring example in biology or just something that resonates with you, something that's interesting, something you discover. And then you say, I wonder how I could apply that to what I'm doing. And today, of course, we're talking a little bit more about what sometimes we call social biomimicry. So how do you apply biomimicry in social contexts, in human contexts? And then I think it leaves a lot of latitude for looking for interesting things in biology and then thinking about how those might resonate with you sort of in your day to day. But you also can practice biomimicry by starting with a challenge. If you're really struggling with something in your leadership or you're struggling with a design challenge, you can frame that challenge in such a way that you can then go and look to nature for inspiration on how to solve it. Another way to practice biomimicry is by emulating life's principles or nature's deep design patterns. And I think this is a little bit more of what David was learning in his course. But what are these deep patterns that we can observe sort of across all of life and across all organisms as a starting point? And just to give you a quick example in the physical context, so biology to design, you might observe that ice forms on top of, say, mint leaves in your garden, but they don't actually freeze, whereas other leaves in your garden do. Well, what allows that to happen? You can explore how the biology of that works and then try to apply that in some context, for example, to an airplane wing or something else that you don't want to freeze. Challenge to biology, you'd start with the problem. How do we prevent ice from forming on airplane wings? But if you're emulating life's principles, you might start with the principle that life uses chemistry that's safe for living beings. And if you're starting from that premise, you may still come up with a chemical solution because chemistry is all over nature, of course, but it's not toxic. So if you're starting with that principle, that could be a good starting point for actually achieving sustainability. And that's why I like starting with framing things with life's principles if there's certain like boundaries you don't want to cross. But generally in practice, especially if you're going challenge to biology, you should be able to ask the question, how does nature, and whatever verb of your choice, how does nature manage temperature, teach, build resilience, move water, create community? As long as you can frame the question in that context, that allows you to start looking for answers in the natural world. Okay, next slide, please. And again, this is just an example to show that these are not hard and fast categories. Velcro, of course, is a famous bio-inspired design example. We call it biomimicry sometimes. It mimics form. It doesn't really get at those life's principles because it's made from oil. But if you were going to approach this problem, you might ask, how does nature attach, stick, adhere, and release, join materials? Like you may have to ask that question in more than one way to really get at the answer you want. So when you're practicing this yourself, just remember that there's different ways to frame the question, and context could come with that question too, which could take you in a different direction. So I titled this Biology to Design or Challenge to Biology because we often talk about this as mimicking biology. A Swiss engineer, Georges de Mestral, was hunting with his dog one day. He noticed all these burrs sticking to its fur. And, a decade later, he patented this hook and loop design of Velcro. But I don't know if this is true or not, but the word is that his wife also had a stuck zipper that morning, right? So he already had this challenge in his head, like, what is wrong with the zipper? And so he made that connection. And so that's why I say it's not hard and fast. You can go back and forth between how you frame those questions. Next slide, please. I worked a long time for the nonprofit Biomimicry Institute, and the last thing I primarily worked on education programs there, but the last thing I worked on there, a funder charged us with looking at how could fashion function more like a healthy ecosystem. And that resulted in this report, The Nature of Fashion, Moving Towards a Regenerative System. And so I've been working in that space quite a bit the last few years and just wanted to share a couple examples from that work. Next slide, please. So I've been working on the ground with a partner, the Ore Foundation in Accra, Ghana. Kantamanto Market is the it's the largest secondhand market in the world. They get 15 million garments shipped to them from the global north every week. So it's a massive amount of textiles in a fairly small country. Again, I'm going to keep this high level, but all of that leads to quite a bit of pollution in the canal that runs behind the market and in this informal community on the edge of the market. You can see with the cattle there, a lot of what's below that cattle is just a huge mound of textiles. And so one of the things we wanted to demonstrate to the community is that we could use nature to purify water, that it was possible to clean up this environment. So we built this living machine, which some of you may have heard of, um, at the warehouse of the Ore Foundation. And this is exactly how nature purifies water. It goes through a number of steps, a number of tanks. There's a ton of surface area from the plant roots in those containers, so it provides a lot of habitat for microbes, and those are the ones that actually clean the water. The canal water is essentially raw sewage because there's a lack of infrastructure there. So if you look at that tiny inset in yellow at the bottom, that bottle on the left shows the color of the water going in, and the bottle on the right shows the color of the water coming out. And actually, the water is better than EPA standards. So anyway, a pretty simple system to demonstrate the power of nature. In this case, we were both using nature and emulating nature's processes and systems. Okay, next slide. We also looked at how does nature break down materials, and we did experiments with bacteria. Bacteria all over the world are adapting to eat plastic. It's a very slow process. It's not going to be a magic bullet, but we set up some of our own experiments on the ground to try to see if native microbes could in fact play a role in addressing this problem. So far, I think that's not going to work, but I just wanted to show you how we were learning from nature and also showing what the limitations of nature are. Okay, then the next slides you can just go through quickly. This would be more from life's principles. So using locally available abundant resources is something nature does everywhere. And so these are just examples of how the Ore Foundation has repurposed this locally available abundant resource of used textiles. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. The whole some of the details of this experience that Megan just described to you. You can tell where I'm at today. I'm at the airport, so I apologize for the oversound. But the resources that we were talking about will be provided to you as well. We've got a couple of links at the end so you can get to some of this work that Megan has been doing. But we want to shift a little bit to this thinking about leadership. And I'd like to ask you to just, if you think that you're a leader, go ahead and just give me a thumbs up or like a wave of the hand if you feel like you are a leader. So I'm curious, like, of the people in the room today, which of you is a leader? Sir, maybe you're able to see.
There's lots
We
of
have lots of thumbs up. Yeah.
Lots of thumbs
Yeah,
up?
a plethora of thumbs up. Yeah, lots of
Awesome.
leaders in the room.
Good, good. Well, that's what we were hoping and expecting, honestly, because as we think here at the Green Schools National Network, these are our core beliefs. And for us, this one of these core beliefs, everyone is a leader and a learner. And so everybody on this call, that definitely is a leader in their own capacity. Frankly, every not only educator and teacher and administrator is a leader, but honestly, every student is a leader as well, whether they're in kindergarten and preschool, all the way up to, seniors. And the thing about leaders, if we consider everybody being a leader, some of the things to consider in the context of leadership, and we're going to see some combinations around biomimicry and life's principles, but wondering, when are we leading? What do we lead? And how do we lead? So within that context, of course, if we're all leaders, when is it that we're leading? When are we leading? Somebody chime in, answer that question for me on that first one. When are we leading?
Gateway 22's Major Passenger, William Lifestyle, Gregory Gonzalez.
I can jump in, Dave.
Yeah,
Anybody
please
else
do.
wants to?
When
Yeah,
are we leading?
so I feel like when am I leading is like depends on which hat I'm wearing, right? Whether it's leading as a parent or leading as an educator or leading teams of adults. And I think it's when there is a need for, in all of those circumstances, when there's a need for group communication or coherence or form and action, in all those settings, whether it's, you know, with children or with adults or even with my own parents who are, in their 70s. So I think in all situations, it's when it's needed.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great answer. I appreciate that. In thinking through that lens of if we're all leaders and leadership is kind of envelops us in so many different ways, the when Brendan just brought up a few different examples, both on a personal level and a professional level, that it's pretty constant. Like we're leading almost all the time in some capacity. People are watching us, whether we know it or not. I'm in the airport right now and I don't feel like I'm leading anybody, but there's people that probably are watching and thinking about like, what is he doing? How's he doing that? So we are leading often and maybe almost all the time. So the win is uh, something that we can take off the table and just recognize that it's happening a lot, if not all the time. The other two, what do we lead and how do we lead are these questions that we want to dive further into. And of course, we're here on this call being led by Green Schools National Network because we have some commonality around what we want to lead. And how we lead is very different between all personality types and everybody who's here. So the how part is something that we'll explore a little bit further as well. In that regard, I want to turn it to Megan to help us think a little bit further and specifically, once again, thinking about like what and how, looking at nature, and then we'll jump into a breakout room to have a little discussion.
Okay, and I'm just going to share a few examples from nature. Again, you can look anywhere. You may have a totem animal or plant that already has inspired you, or maybe you have some challenges you're facing and you want to go and look broadly to nature for inspiration. But wolves, I think, fit really well with what David was just saying, in that they allow for both leadership and learning. There's peer-to-peer learning as well as adult to juvenile learning. Adult leadership in wolves is pretty challenging. They need to mediate conflicts between pack members. I'm sure that sounds familiar. Adjust hunting strategies based on pack composition and prey availability. So they need to be able to, be in the moment and adjust to changing conditions. And then they also need to make seasonal migration decisions. But at the same time, alpha wolves modify their leadership style based on circumstances. So sometimes they lead from the front during hunts, and maybe if food or a kill is really essential, then the alpha male will lead from the front to better ensure that they might get a kill. But other times they allow experienced subordinates to take the point positions because, of course, they need that experience to grow into those leadership positions. And situational leadership appears to develop only after wolves have accumulated enough life experience to sort of understand all of those complex factors that affect pack survival. Okay, next slide, please. Sedges you might not naturally look to for leadership, but again, you can look anywhere in nature for inspiration. And these sedges of the Midwest, Wisconsin and other states, are really interesting because they form tussocks, and those tussocks cultivate diversity. They allow other species to thrive that otherwise not be able to survive in those conditions. They create a lot of microhabitats that support more vulnerable species, and they adjust diversity over time so that there are more options. So in thinking about leadership, you can think about the, diversity of people you work with, diversity of students you work with. Are there times where it's appropriate to create micro habitats or different conditions for certain learners, for certain colleagues? How do you support those that are more vulnerable? And these are just some examples of ways that you can think about how nature is fostering this really strong community and try to apply some of those lessons to what you're doing. Okay, next slide. I think many of us, especially if you're not a birder, you just think, oh, the birds, come back every year and build a nest, and that's just what they do. It's all instinctual. But actually, scientists are finding that birds learn over time, and they get better and better at their nest building over time, and they also respond to changes in the environment. And as leaders, I know we all know this, but sometimes we can be rigid, and what we really need to do is be able to bend, right? And be a little bit flexible. Um, and I'm sure everyone has seen kind of a classroom like this, right? I think in this case it was intentional. They look like they're maybe celebrating a Dodgers win there or something. Um, but we need to be responsive to the environment. Sometimes maybe seasonal factors are affecting what's going on in our work environment. Maybe we haven't been paying attention to our own circadian rhythms, right? And so we can't get in a groove. Um, and again, this is somewhat metaphorical and social biomimicry, but it's this idea of being responsive to the environment and really paying attention. Don't just go along every day like this is what happens at this time every day. This is how this person responds, right? But really, we need to pay attention. Phones are a huge distraction, of course, these days. But what if you just stop and pause and take a deep breath and really try to get in tune with the people that you're working with, the people you're engaging with that day? And what can you sense about the particular environment in that moment? And I think that will help for better leadership. Okay, next slide. This is another. Oh, sorry. Do you want me to go ahead?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know
Megan,
if.
I jumped ahead for you, but yeah, go ahead. Keep
Sorry,
going.
I didn't know if how we were doing on time, but you can cut
You
me
can go
off
ahead.
at any point. But this one is just kind of fun. I've always loved.
Good afternoon and welcome to American
I've always
Flight.
loved dolphins, and bottlenose dolphins are also this great example of both fostering peer-to-peer learning or leadership along with adult to juvenile mentorship. So I think this is pretty recent science as well, but for a long time we know a lot of mammalian species learn from their parents, right? But we're also starting to see many more examples of how they're learning from other adults as well as older juveniles and even peers. And this is true in bottlenose dolphins, especially with innovation. So they suspect that when there's an innovative strategy, in this case, I think they call it shelling. So bottlenose dolphins swim to the bottom of the seafloor and they might chase a fish that's hard to catch along the bottom of the seafloor and they chase it into a shell and then they bring that shell to the surface and they tip the fish right into their mouth. But they found that this strategy passed much more frequently among peers than it did from adults to juveniles. And they think that when things are riskier, when the environment's changing, then that peer-to-peer learning becomes more important. And again, this may or may not apply in your particular context, but there are these really interesting and subtle things that you can learn about leadership or that you could apply from nature if you go looking for it. And then finally, this touches on what David was talking about in the introduction about what you already covered. But simple rules in nature lead to emergent behaviors. So what are simple rules you can put in place to help things flow, to help emergent behaviors arise without trying to control every single variable? So in this case, ants coordinate a lot of their movements and their harvesting through these simple rules. To achieve really great things. And again, that's ideally something that we want to be able to foster in our work situations and our classrooms as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. We're going to take a little bit of time and send you to a breakout room with one other person. And while you're in that breakout room, just do a quick introduction and just give a little bit of background for yourself. Where do you excel as a leader? Megan gave you a variety of different examples of where and how and what leadership looks like. But we know that everybody in this room has some things that you excel at. And then consider, is there a species, an animal or a plant, something that has similar strengths? Like what would you align with on some of your strengths? So you're going to have about 5 minutes with your partner. So not a long time, but about 5 minutes to have a quick conversation, introduce each other, and then we'll come back after 5 minutes. Right. Send everybody off, Sarah, and we'll have a quick discussion.
So I'm gonna push you into a room, Dave, where Jamie is by himself because somebody just logged off.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I'll go in a room. Just bring us back in 5 minutes.
Gotcha. And Megan, I'll do the same thing for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Hmm. Oh. Is my sharing on? Do you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. Is everybody back, Sarah? Let's see. Yes?
Yep, we got everybody just joined us back.
All right. Welcome back, folks. Hey, John, good to see you. Glad you're here today. Hey, just real quick, let's hear a couple shout outs. What animal or species got named within your conversation? So not the explanation, just unmute yourself and tell us which species or what came up.
Elephant and mother tree.
Nice.
Lichen and spider plants.
Interesting.
We had a bird, beaver. We had a group of 3, beaver and something with a big system. So I was thinking we didn't get there, but maybe like an aspen.
Nice. Perfect. That's a good one.
Leaf cutter ants and mitochondrial networks.
Woo! I love it. Love it. Awesome. Thanks, you all. Well, there might be some others. You just throw them in the chat. Would love to hear what you came up with. And we're gonna keep going. And what I want to share with you to go a little bit further and deeper with this work is a couple of you know that I've been kind of deep into this particular book that I really love. And I've already gifted several copies out to people. I highly recommend it. Brad Stulberg's a really phenomenal writer and thinker, and he did tons of research. And previous to his book coming out, oftentimes I would tell people, we're talking about sustainability education with a lot of people, education for sustainability, but really what we're talking about is educational excellence. That's ultimately what we're going for. We want to get kids outdoors more, if we want better food programs, if we want buildings to be built better so that they have more energy and more efficient around water and waste, all those things relate to educational excellence. And it so happened that his book came out in November, and my friend said, "Oh, you got to read this book. It's on excellence." In the first 3 chapters, he talks about the biology, the psychology, and the physiology of excellence. And in the next ensuing chapters, he goes into a lot of mindsets, habits, and practices to consider. 2 of those that I want to highlight today and connect them once again to areas of biomimicry are care and focus. So care, just briefly, caring is the first one that he mentions. Caring drives everything, regardless of what it is you do. So, if we want our schools and districts to be more focused around sustainability and regeneration and really be passionate about this work, there needs to be a high level of care, right? So how do we cultivate that? It's this interplay between fit and grit that he talks about. And how do you care deeply in a way that is sustainable? Because sometimes when you care so much, that's not sustainable itself. So he talks about setting boundaries and having a sense of humor and surrounding yourself with good art and books and of course people. And once again, giving yourself grace too. So this whole aspect of care is really fascinating. One of the things he talked about in there is that elite athletes or performers or musicians oftentimes have a diversity that helps them understand when they get to something that they really care for. In other words, most of the time they didn't know it when they were a child. Very few people who care deeply about things knew that that was the thing that they were going to really care about when they were young. They experimented, they tried new things, and they found eventually that thing that they care deeply about. So that exercise of practice and exploration is so important to caring. Focus is this another one that I think is so important right now because of the attention economy that we're in the middle of. And I love this initial quote. There's an ongoing battle right now between algorithmic mass distraction and focus. Excellence requires winning it. And it's not easy. Like we're battling culture right now. We're battling technology. We're battling so many things in our world. And, I love this too, thinking about the more diffuse our attention. So, like he goes into multitasking. Some of us say that we're multitaskers. He points out like that's not possible for humans. It's just not. And so when we do that, when we give our attention to a variety of places, actually it raises our level of angst and restlessness and discontent. And I thought this was fascinating. This researcher who's really looked at deep attention has found that humans in general, and this is looking across spectrums, and about 20 years ago, that the average time was over 2 minutes that people could really be in deep attention. Now it's 47 seconds, and that number is dropping. So it's fascinating what we even do in the classroom, where we sometimes expect and want deep attention. And, not only are students struggling with that, our teachers are struggling with it. We see a lot of challenges. Many of us in this room lead professional learning, and we see a challenge to keep people's attention because of just the habits that people have been building. So he talks a lot about eliminating distractions and deep focus blocks and just some tips and tricks around helping go deeper in focus. So just to highlight a couple of those areas, both focus and care. And Megan's going to talk briefly about where we see some of this in nature.
Okay, thank you, David. And I haven't read the book, but I really want to. So I'm coming at this, just from a looking to nature level. But one way to demonstrate care also is to practice patience. And this example of the elephant is, it's not showing patience with others, but just thinking about the timetable of things in nature. So elephants have the longest gestation period of any animal, I believe, anywhere from 18 to 22 months. Imagine having to carry a child, take care of yourself, for that amount of time. So it takes a lot of patience to bring forth this new life in the elephant world. But it also, in this particular case, it's found a particular kind of tree that's actually going to help it with the birth. And so it's also when I think about nature and I think about foraging, right? Most of us don't have to forage to survive right now, right? But we used to as humans, and it took a lot of patience to be able to track animals, to hunt animals, to harvest berries very slowly instead of going to the freezer compartment at the supermarket and buying a huge bag, right? So we also can show care to our community, to our students, to our colleagues, by practicing patience with them, as demonstrated by the elephant. This one doesn't get talked about a lot in nature, and I think as humans we know it, but sometimes this can slip away, right? When we think there are more important things to do, but we can really demonstrate care by also making time for and cultivating joy. And I stole this montage of animals from, I think, the Science News website. They were reporting on some research that there's more and more research coming out about animals demonstrating joy. And we often talk about conflict among animals, or we're starting to talk a little bit more about cooperation and community within a species. But also, there's just this outright joy and play that's really important, I think, in terms of demonstrating care. All right, next one. I think for focus too, I think investing resources strategically, as happens in this rainforest, um, is another way to be able to keep our focus. We're not ever going to be able to meet all of the demands on our time in the modern world. So taking some time to focus, thinking about where we can add more resources, or where maybe our resources aren't as necessary. Maybe somebody else can provide resources for something else within this broader ecosystem. So really thinking about how to just be strategic with where we place those resources, including our time, can actually be more beneficial than trying to, spread those resources thin across a wider area. And then use focus in context. So this is the Clark's nutcracker. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this Western bird, but it can cache over like 10,000 nuts, like all over the place. So it uses focus both to gather those seeds. So like in the moment, it needs to gather these resources and be focused on that specific moment. But there's also this, I think, again, related to what David was saying in terms of eliminating distractions, sometimes focus has to be deployed over time, right? So if you have a big goal or a big project, how are you going to get to that end point? How are you going to manage the steps along the way so that you can remember to go back and get all of those nuts in the case of Clark's nutcracker? So again, just thinking about the different, for me, I guess there's different sort of levels or different layers of focus. So you might need immediate focus for certain things and paying attention sort of in the moment, hopefully for at least 2.5 minutes, if not longer. But then also, how do you retain that focus to accomplish something bigger over time? Okay, next slide. And then if you have trouble focusing, this has been true for a long, long time. I'm sure many of you do this already, but going outside, right? There is no better way, I don't think, to get myself to focus, maybe for many of you to get kids to focus, than to go outside and spend time in nature. And of course, there's oodles of research showing just how important that is. But even for you as an individual, if you're struggling to focus, maybe just try to make a practice of going outside for 5 minutes in the morning, right? When you're first waking up, getting that initial sunshine of the day and just taking some deep breaths, or, not thinking or thinking about a particular challenge that you're facing, leaving your phone in the house. But really, if you have trouble focusing, if your kids are having trouble focusing, go outside because that's what nature does. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Megan. We're gonna take some of this we just talked about. We're not gonna actually head to a breakout room. We're just gonna have an open discussion here for just a couple minutes. I'd be curious for folks to just see if you'd be willing to do this. How do you foster the growth of care, both with yourself and others, and also around focus? What are some strategies? What are some things that you do? And we're all leaders in this context, and maybe it's even connected to one of those other species. But what are some things you're doing to foster the growth of care with yourself and others in focus? Does anybody want to jump in? Love to hear from you.
I'll just share focus. Something that I like to do is movement. So finding ways to be in touch with my physical body and knowing and recognizing. I think a lot of times we ignore our body in the long workday too, and just recognizing the natural that we are, as human beings, we are animals as well. And so recognizing that and reconnecting with my muscles and, stretching and movement, exercising, running, being outside, is definitely a way to reconnect and focus.
This is the final word.
I'll jump in, Dave. In terms of care, I think it's really doing kind of consistently inventorying what I truly care about, what I prioritize, and looking at my actions, how I spend my time, and trying to make sure that those are connected. Because I think I personally feel the most out of balance or not content when those are not congruent, right? The things that I'm saying I care most about, that I'm actually spending my most of my time and energy, and making sure that those are aligned, my actions and what I say I care about. So kind of continuously going back and inventorying, if this is what I care about, this is what I should be prioritizing in terms of what I do.
I love both of those. Thank you, Katie and Sarah, both the movement piece and the inventory element. Sarah, how about one or two more?
I do an activity with my students where I have them draw out as best they can the blueprint of their house. And then once everybody's done that, they share the details in their home, but we go over, everybody has a place where you get food, right? You have a place where you get water, you have shelter and space. And then I connect it to animals when they're outside. Where do they get their food, their water, their shelter, their space? It's a lot harder for animals to get all of those things that they need to survive. So when you're outside, you're in their animals' homes. And when you're in somebody's home, how do you act? How do you treat the environment when you're in somebody's home? And it helps them connect to nature that way.
I love that, bringing up both those connections leading to the caring piece. Brittany, that's awesome. How about one more? Thanks for that.
We've got a couple in the chat. Jamie talked about helping people connect so they feel their relationships with the things we want them to care about.
Yeah.
In terms of focus, giving people a juicy task or challenge.
Yeah.
And
Those are
John mentioned giving hardworking staff time, recognition, and time off.
Yeah. Yeah. Things that we need. Awesome. Thanks all. Those are all really awesome examples. I appreciate that. That's what I'm going to encourage you all. Hopefully you come back on May 5th when we have our second round. We're going to go a little bit deeper and look at a couple other traits and think about some more context connected to biomimicry on May 5th. But take some time to connect with both of those two things, care and focus. Where are you supporting yourself with deepening your own care? Where are you supporting others? And how are you, like Brad Stolberg says, battling the attention economy and that algorithm of distraction, and so that you can be more focused and those around you and those you work with can be more focused. So those are good things to be thinking about. We want to just highlight a couple of upcoming things. Like Sarah mentioned, Green Spark. Green Spark's going to be amazing. We have really phenomenal students that are lined up and are excited to share. So we're so excited about this Green Spark. This will be the first inaugural event that we've done. And I would love to have all of you there for all or part of that. We have an amazing keynote speaker who's a NASA climate science communicator. Her name's Aya Lindquist. She's amazing. She'll be there. So check out this page and you can register right from the QR code or the link that Sarah puts in the chat. And then part 2 is coming on the 5th. So hope to see you back on May 5th. We really would love to get a little bit of your feedback. So if you also could click on the link that Sarah puts in the chat, it'll be a quick jot form to give us some feedback both on this session to help us think about what we do this next time when we are facilitating the next session and things that you might be interested in and want to know more about. So we would love for you to take just a little bit of time with that as you open that and give us a little feedback. Thank you in advance for taking some time to do that. Lastly, these are a couple of websites that Megan highly recommends. There's lots of stuff out there on biomimicry, but Ask Nature, which is one of my favorite websites, is really phenomenal. and curated and put together by the Biomimicry Institute. And definitely recommend checking that out. And then the Learn Biomimicry is from a group in South Africa that has been thinking a lot about this work as well. There's some good resources there for you to look at. In the resource folder are a couple of documents. There's some stuff on life's principles. There's things related to some of the work that Megan was doing around fashion and nature. And there's a slide deck that is from last year's sessions. Actually, it was session 3. That is a copy of that slide deck, so you can see more of what was a part of the community practice a year ago. We will send you a copy of the link for this particular recording, but also the slides so that you have those and you can check those out later. And we just want to thank you again for being here. Please reach out at any time and know that we're glad to answer any of your questions and we stay connected with you all. But thanks for taking an hour and being with us this afternoon.